Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's seminar hosted by the International Inequalities Institute. My name is Javier Jara, and I'm Assistant Professorial Research Fellow at the International Inequalities Institute. I am very pleased to be chairing today's seminar titled Using Microsimulations to Estimate Historical Income Distributions, Italy, 1861-2021. Which is part of the IAI Inequality Seminar Series. Today's speaker is Professor Giovanni Vecchi. Giovanni is Professor of Economics at the University of Rome, Vergata, and he's also consultant to the World Bank on issues related to poverty and inequality measurement. As usual, there will be a chance to ask questions after the presentation, but Giovanni is happy to get interrupted and take any clarification questions during the seminar. We will take questions both in person and to the online audience, and I will hand it over now to Giovanni.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here. As you can see, this is a joint work with quite a number of colleagues, Brian Ahern, Pembroke College in Oxford, and Nicola Mendola and Federico Bellotti. One is an economist, the other one is an econometrician. They belong to my university. Giulia Mancini commuting Rome to Sassari, Sardinia, back and forth, and myself. So I'm very pleased to share with you what we have so far. This is a project that has been funded by the European Plan of National Recovery and Resilience, and economic historians got a chance to implement their research thanks to this project here. So, in a very few words, the ultimate aim of the project is to come up with a history of the country that looks at distributional outcomes, inequality, poverty, mobility, things that are usually absent from the historiography that is kind of GDP based, despite being by now a mantra that we should go beyond GDP. In practice, we promised to estimate. Now, I'm just using colors to pay attention very carefully because it's a very ambitious plan here. I promised European funding system to provide them with annual household income estimates of the whole income distribution curve for 160 years. All right, this is what I promised. Once we have the curves for every year, we are in a position to investigate and to tell our history from a different angle, seeing who benefited when and how much from very different stages. Because in the period that is covered here, as you can see, Italy was born as a kingdom on March 17, 1861. And so we would like to know, and we have experienced since that time, everything, wars, pandemics, and everything. So if we have curves that change by the year, we hope to see the impact of all these bad things, not necessarily only bad, idiosyncratic or systemic shocks that have hit in the system, and figuring out who has paid the price. This is the point of having the whole curve estimate, not just the Gini, right? That's the main, the key distinction here. So what do we know as of today? Well, this is a very little known book that I wrote in 2017, and the main source that I used here, it's historical household budgets, to be defined shortly. And this, it's a few other references, but the bottom line, to save you the effort of going through the book, is just a couple of graphs where I summarized what is the story with regard to inequality in the country. So on the horizontal axis, we have the 160 years. On the vertical axis, we have inequality, is the Gini index. So the highest is the index, the highest the inequality. And as you can see, we have 10 years frequency estimates for the first 100 period. And then we use different sources that are used with different symbols to figure out the overall trend. And so if we had to believe to this story here, Italy was a poor country, super poor, belonging to the periphery of Europe. And we have a nice story. It's a country that escaped misery. It joined the G7. It became a very rich country. And at the same time, efficiency was combined with equity. Inequality went down in the long run. But as you can clearly see, the trend has reversed. And very recently, we have taken a completely different direction. this is what we know so far. It's not yearly, it's not high frequency, but we have a sense of certain features of our long-run economic development. And similarly, we also have for absolute poverty something like similar, right? I will get back to this, so I will not waste your time. But there is an overall decrease in absolute poverty. And here, if I updated this, I didn't do that on purpose, but right now, Italy with Greece has not recovered, and we are in double digit again. So history is telling you that it's not a march towards progress. It's we are going back, right? And we can see that clearly also in these estimates. What else do we? Yes, please.
Does it make any difference if you do it pre-tax and transfers or post-tax and transfers, or you only have it for this is like
this is
disposable?
This is gross. The only way we have it's pre-tax.
Okay.
We are aiming at having after tax, but for the time being, in order to have some kind of consistency through the different sources that I will walk you through, it's gross income per person. Right, there isn't much else. There are a few other works that are worth mentioning that are contributing to our knowledge. But the common denominator here is that economic historians are kind of, and this is my understanding, of course, are kind of happy of having second best sources, and then you have to become ingenious when it comes to use something that is second best. Here, the idea is to use a different approach. And the contribution of this project is to deliver a new data set and annual data for the 160 plus years, and to use microsimulations. Microsimulation is the bread and butter. We have seen them in action during the COVID, right? All international agencies have been asked to make predictions on what's going to happen. Who should we support after the COVID has hit? And so we have a lot of tools that can be used, are usually employed for forecasting, but economic historians can use them for backcasting things, and they have advantages. So this is the basic idea. So the idea is that we will try to put together static microsimulations currently in use by economists. You might like it or not, but this is what IMF and the World Bank does when something bad happens and they have to make quick projections in order to figure out what kind of action should be taken. And we use this in order to recover our story back in the past. So the bottom line here is that we are trying not to be happy with compromises in a way. The claim here, it's that we don't want to use proxy variables. Economic historians don't have household income. They have wages, they have other things that they assume to capture well-being of individuals. But of course, you do not capture kids, you do not capture many segments in the population. So in order to figure out how things go, you should use modern data, which is data that are collected at the household level, and therefore, and then pooled and shared with people living in the household. This is what we do in development economics and also in rich countries. So we would like to do that. So no proxy variables, take advantage of whatever methodology we think it's useful to coming up with estimates of poverty inequality, and therefore being on the same footing as welfare analysts are today. That's the idea. So even if our investigation focused on the past, the idea is that we can share the same toolbox as welfare analysts today. How do we do that? Well, that's what I mean by compromises. This is something that I just came up in preparing this presentation. I browsed through the website, the World Inequality Database. Of course, you should be familiar with that. And I checked for Italy. And I was very surprised to come up with this. This is a graph telling me some top share of top 10% shares. I was a little bit surprised about the timing because we were not a country until 1861. And here I have data that go back, and I'm not sure. So I start digging because I wanted to come with you prepared. And therefore, I start inquiring, clicking on this, right? And I kept clicking to see how did they do that? Because I've been spending 20 years in figuring out, this kind of indicators. And so I found the description, and there were a few caveats. not the whole population. We don't have kids. We should discuss about women, but and we have a definition of income that is not the one that is currently used by the Canberra group. This is the definition that has been agreed in the United Nations, and all countries that are part of the sort of network, they stick to this definition. And this is not what it, that means that the coverage of income is not the one that we would like it to be. This is a comprehensive definition. The one that is used there is not that happy. If you keep scrolling, you will find the usual words, right? You will find extrapolation, interpolation, and things that it's really hard to understand. But in the end, you have the paper. And the paper, I checked the paper. This is the paper. And I went through the technical small, and this is an annex that is online. And the assumption, the way they constructed that number is taking the average. So you construct Italy by averaging out 4 different countries. This is amazing. To me, is amazing. And under the file details, you have the same story. As you can see, they estimate the share of the bottom 50% of Italians averaging out 4 different countries. SE, I don't even know what is SE, but Sweden. All right, so you can just think how similar we are to Sweden. But so the thing is, this is obvious. As an economic historian, we spend our time in the archives. We don't average Dutch with Germans and French to get Italians, right? That doesn't really. And then I'm not very happy with the details, right? Because in this business here, when it comes to estimating inequality, it's really about the details. And we have very important contribution in the literature that tell us how sensitive, how fragile are the statistical creatures to small inaccuracies in the data and in the method. So what do we have? Well, we in order to come up with 160 years of curves, we need to have samples or data that are representative of the whole population, high frequency, and then I will be happy to share with you national level representative samples so far. Now here is just, I think this is the common ground. This is a super important econometrica paper where they show that most inequality indices have an unbounded influence function. A small percentage of contamination here might be responsible for infinite bias in any inequality measures. And here we have other contributions that are telling you that in order to trust any distribution sensitive indicators, you have to make sure that all segments of your population are in your data. Tails, in what is in between, and so forth. So this is trivial, but it's just a reminder that we should take this contribution seriously. Not just, I'm talking to economic historians, of course, right? Economists, they are the authors here, so I'm taking that for granted. So this is one thing, and this is the second. For some reason, I don't have the colors and figures, but let me pretend that the graph shows what there should be there. And in my slide was there. Here we don't have it, but I will use my hands to figure out what is meant, what I was meant to communicate. There is a technical glitch here. The graph is not showing up. Anyway, this is the 160 years, and there are 3 different types of sources. And the pattern is not specific to Italy. In the book that I mentioned, we surveyed many countries, and by and large, this is what you expect to find in any country in the world. Starting from mid-70s, you have the modern household budget surveys data. Could be income, could be expenditures, could be both. So this is what I call survey data, and they should be publicly available. So you download it by 1 click. And so you cover the last 40, 50 years easily in most countries. Then you have, between World War II and the 70s, you had surveys that were piloted. You have episodic, not regular, but the microdata didn't survive. So what we have is tabular data. You can call it grouped data if you are statisticians, but I will show you examples here. We don't have household level data. That is the problem. We have something that we can hope to recover the microdata based on this. And this is our main challenge, is what to do for the period when even the idea of sampling was not there, right? Because the This is a time where, sampling was still not even existing. So let me very quickly walk you through this. Regarding Italy, you have the Bank of Italy. Bank of Italy runs a nice survey. It's called SHIP. It covers more or less the last 40, 50 years. You can download in data everything done in English, and then you can also have all kinds of documentation available. So overall, estimating inequality and everything in the last 40 years is not a big challenge. For most countries, it's easy. We have that the same entities, institutions, the national statistical offices, the banks, the central banks, and so forth, but other private institutes, they used to run surveys on households, but the problem is that microdata did not survive the time. You don't find them. And what you find the tables. The tables are something like this. It's just something that is recovered from the basement, digitized when you're lucky, and then you're given this margin. We can call it marginal distributions. We have hundreds of this, right? So here we have income brackets, and then you are told how many people are inside each category according to a second dimension, and you have really thick printouts available. So the challenge here is how to recover the microdata so that they fit the overall, as you can see, valore medio, the average, and so you can calibrate weights so that they fit the original survey. So here we have that the idea is very simple. If you have the tabular data, you can construct a Lorentz curve, or even better, a generalized Lorentz curve. So this is not scale invariant, right? And once you have the first challenge is to fit it, but this is no problem. We have sigma data, we have 4 parameters, generalized beta of the second kind. We can fit, right, the data with the parametric model. Once we have the data fitted, we can compute all measures that we want as a function of the estimated parameters. So the Gini is a closed function of the estimated parameters of this model. And in the end, this is what I want, or what the team is doing something crazy. It's just recovering the household level data. We call that synthetic because we cannot really attach a name to each record, but we ungroup the tabular data so that we go back to a curve that has the same moments as the table. And weights can be recalibrated so that we just reproduce the tables, but we produce this artificial synthetic micro household level data. And by so doing, we're learning a lot. And I'll show you a few examples on this. Now, the most difficult time is prior to World War II. Here there is a sort of manifesto that we wrote at some point. The only institution that trusted us was the INET, the Institute of New Economic Thinking. They gave us a little bit of funding, and we wrote this manifesto saying, hey, historical household budgets, it's a source that can be used in many countries, most countries. If we can do that in Italy, you can think about countries that have a longer tradition than the Italian one when it comes to collecting statistics. German comes to mind, French comes to mind, but also India is rich. There are many, we experiment this in African countries. You can find beautiful surprises. Now, what is an historical household budget? Exactly. And this is our definition. You give me any document that you might have in your own house, at your home. Households, families used to keep their domestic accounts, many of them, just writing on a daily basis what they used to spend and what was so that at the end of the month, they were trying to figure out, how things were going. So we need any document with these 5 pieces of information: the year, location of the household, the occupation of the household head, and then I want to know the household size because I need the per capita, and then give me either the income or household of all income household components, not just the wage. I don't want wages. That's the difference between us and Wageland. Those think that wages can tell the story. And that's a very big mistake. Wage earners was a luxury in the past, and so forth. Anyway, so we have many. They have been described as a kaleidoscope, meaning that you can't make sense of them really. There are many, many sources. If you come with me to an archive, you will be surprised that you find information on household expenditures or income in many different sources, in newspapers, in personal files. I have a few examples for you, just to clarify how surprising it could be. This is the newspapers from 1881, The Peasant, Il Contadino, that they were concerned about the living standards of their own category, right? Of people. And then what they do? Well, they publish. This is on a 2-week basis. They publish information. Each row here, it's a household, and you are given the location. So this is Novara, Sondrio. These are provinces scattered in the region. You're given the occupation. So what kind of activity they were involved in. The household size, so how many people lived in there, and then you have the dream. This is a super beautiful. Of course, I'm trying to showcase the best sources here, but I was very much surprised because you have both expenditures, food and non-food, and total income, right? For each of this, and you have a few hundreds of these sources here. And yes, please.
About the methodology which has been used to collect this data,
Almost nothing.
the representativeness, possible
Almost nothing.
selection.
I will get back to this because that is a killing argument, of course. But I'm patient, and I'm just saying that there are so many of these sources that I will put all of them in a basket, and then I will answer your question. And so this is another beautiful source. Personal files, all employees, no matter what, public or private, from the ministry all the way down to the doorman. Once they got the position, they were asked to compile something like this. We call it personal file. And this is a file that it's kept and fed alive along with the economic life of each worker. And this contains information on the wife, if the person is married, and it has the income of the wife here. And you have information of kids when they were born and so forth, right? So you really have the information that if you are patient enough, you get close to have what you want, the overall. And what you get here, well, you have the whole history for each worker. Bobbio is a super famous. He became the president of the European International Statistical Institute in 1909. So he's a very well-known scholar. But as you can see, you have all these spaghettis here, right? These are the modern longitudinal data. And you have non-anonymity here. You know everything about them. And you also have population registers that you can sort of hopefully link if you have money enough, right? So this is another source that is feeding and is the source of plenty of, this applies to public administration, but also in the company's archives. You have exactly the same thing. The last example is just stunning and amazing. It's at some point in 1868, the central government gave all municipalities, we have about 8,000 municipalities, they're called comuni in Italy, the opportunity, they told, look, comuni, if you want to levy your tax on household income, you can do it. So basically, that law that was created 7 years after unification was in force until very recently, very, very recently. So this is more than 100 years when every municipality had a chance to tax household incomes. So we had the idea, the direction that central government gave was to tax affluence. So agiatezza, it's a concept that, as you can imagine, an uncoordinated community interpreted agiatezza in a different way, right? So someone, they didn't even care about considering income, but it turns out that most municipalities, they interpreted that as income. And when income, you will be surprised. I'm just putting back this Canberra thing again and again because it plays a very important role for us. So you will be surprised on how close they are to the current modern definition of income. Comuni had a deep knowledge of each household. They knew every and each person by name, and all their activities was kind of well known. So we have a very good sense of total income. And they turned out to use handwritten, beautiful registers. Here I have a snapshot. Each row is a household. It's beautiful, big registers, right? And as you can see, you have all the ingredients that you want. This is from Modena, and the city I'm originally from. You have the name, your son of, so we can link. I will get back to this at the very end in terms of inequality of opportunity, social mobility, and so forth. You'll link to the name of the father, of course, right? So we can get back to the father, and often we find the father in previous registers. And then you have occupation. You can geolocalize your data because you're given the address with the civic number, right? You really get down to a very super high precision, other family members, and then you have income. And reddito complessivo is overall income. And you have the description of how that should be calculated. And that is very close to Canberra. It's not exactly equal. So based on that, we were surprised to find in the archive out of Rome, find that everybody is there. We had the Prime Minister Giolitti, and you can see the occupation, Presidente del Consiglio. It's the Prime Minister, and he was taxed, and you have the income of this guy here. You have novelists, and you have everybody. So you can put these people. This was Rome. In Torino, you have the Agnelli, that is the founder of the car makers that you have probably heard, Luigi Naudi. You have everybody. So you can put basically all these people in a similar graph as before. Here, I'm just using Pirandello as a numeraire. So if its income is equal to a 1, and this is his sort of how steep or flat was his trajectory over time, then you can see that being a prime minister, you earn 5 as much. And Gentilini is a biscuit maker. He's a migrant that came to UK. He learned to do some cookies. He came back to Rome, and you can't come to Rome without tasting Gentilini. It's super famous. It's still there, right, in the supermarkets and so forth. So, and then you have this. You might have heard of him. He's a beer maker and is still very popular. And this is telling you, and this is the inventor Guglielmo Marconi. You have them there. If they move, you track them in another place. So if we now add to this picture, and of course, and you have the clergy. That's amazing. You have everybody. You have priests, bishops. This is a cardinal. So the cardinal, it's worth 12 Pirandello, right? It's earning that much. So you have this kind of a, this is important because even today we don't have a sense about the real distance that, because these are not part of people that he surveyed, not even today. So we know very little. And I think there's a lot that we are learning about this. Here, if we play the heavy, so if we put Agnelli, so if we put together Rome and Turin, that gives you a distance. So Agnelli, it's kind of setting a completely different yardstick, right? And you give a sense, you get a sense by putting together this information on real distances in the country among people. So what is interesting about this registers is that they're longitudinal, is the same person tracked over time, which is amazing, I think. But this poses a challenge of how to link household, because you have this handwritten registers and you have to decipher the handwriting, which is a pain, at least for me, and you have big numbers. And then you're not sure whether people that are doing this work for you are doing this correctly. So to me, this linking here, it's like, here is just an example. There are very few records for which it's clearly, it happens to match the name, the surname, and so forth. So this is 2 different years taken at random, and you have that a few people, you can appreciate that whether they improved, that is their income. But for others, you're not entirely sure because there are small, minor misspellings. So is it genuine or is it a problem with the data entry and so forth and so on? So we have uncertainty that is bothering me tremendously. And then we have a lot of reds. It might be that it's misspelled. It may be that they exit. It might be a brother. It could be, it's a big challenge. So here for this, we are kind of dealing with a source that for some reasons is not showing beautiful bubbles. Here was supposed pretend that you see bubbles everywhere, meaning that we have plenty. But just to give you a sense of the quantity of the data that we have, the estimated overall total, it's a very large number of registers. Every registers, if I calculate average number of pages and 10 household per page, which is the standard, gives us a number that, you know, it's too big for me to digest. It's cumulated households tracked over time, right? So even if we assume, as municipalities were doing, that there is an exemption threshold, so if you are poorer than a certain threshold, you are not in the register, and not all comuni, they decided to opt for that, it's still a big, that is two number to be processed. So far we have, you know, with all this money that we receive from Europe, we've just managed to get close to nothing, but still it's big enough. So the process here is that we need to go to the archives, make a lot of pictures, and pictures cost a lot of money. Unfortunately, I'm learning this. And then this is really where we got stuck. We have to transform pictures into Excel or Stata or Python or whatever. And this is the challenge here. After that, I will take care of how to transform this collection into something that can be claimed to be representative, right? But here the challenge is that we came to the conclusion that no matter how much money you are willing to borrow, to lend me, I cannot recruit an army large enough to enter this data. And therefore, this is just a very quick back of the envelope calculation. If I only played with Rome, for which we have located all registers, for which we have spent a fortune in taking pictures, that takes many terabytes, which is something that required buying server, things that I was not even aware of their existence. Now, the problem is that now, how do I process such a big number of handwritten information? That is the challenge. So I thought I would ask engineers. I think they're paid for writing brilliant algorithms. And there is this handwritten text recognition field. And we just joined this university. Is not an accident. It's the same university I'm from, because just was, you know, this European project, you have the pressure of time. They don't care, you have to deliver. So I just took the first that was willing to help. And we are trying to read human writing. And so far I'm flat. I mean, I receive these tables on a weekly basis. And my reaction is that even if this is supposed to be how many characters are the error rates in terms of either characters or words, and this is too high for me. Even if it's apparently better than other competitors, it's still a lot of noise and mismatching that is bothering me a lot. But this is where we are, and I thought to advertise this more as a cry for help than for a sense of accomplishment. Really, is not my job. This. So basically, in order to come up with something that will lead us to the curve, I have a super large sample, definitely. The difficult years is the first century. This is for all countries, not just for Italy. But here, it just gives you a sense that without having the engineers making predictions on handwritten things, we managed to have a very large sample. For 100 years, this is not bad in terms of size. And the question is that no matter how big this sample, because of all kinds of selection processes, you might not have representativeness. So how do I do with that? I think I have a blue slide here. Yes. All right. This is the 3 key steps in order to convince you, and myself also, because numbers, I'm not very happy what I'm getting right now. But in the first place, I do exactly the same thing, mutatis mutandis, than the World Bank does when they compare countries. You have to compare what is not comparable. You cannot compare Italian data with data from Malawi or from Vietnam. They're not comparable, trust me, but we do it. So, and we call it harmonization. And this harmonization would be nice if it were ex ante. So if we agreed before we survey household, at least on something, but countries do not coordinate like this, right? So even all global estimates we have, they have to deal with ex post harmonization. And this is what we do. We have many different sources and we have to come up with one definition of income. Then we have to deal with representativeness. And the way we do with modern data, we create expansion factors, right? We don't have random samples. No one in the world run random samples. If you don't have random samples, you have weights. And the way you calculate weights, you use population censuses in order to figure out how many households or people is each record in your survey representative of. So this is what we also do, exactly as welfare analysts. Now, let's see how convincing, but this is what we have. And then, of course, once you have the samples and you see the average income of Italians according to your samples, they will tell you a different story than the national accountants. There will be a discrepancy. Maybe the GDP per capita is telling you that everything is going well, but your survey data are saying the opposite. And this kind of inconsistency happens all the time in all countries, big fights between national accountants and surveys people because they argue, hey, I'm wrong, no, you're bad, and so wrong, right? So we have the same situation here. And so harmonization is easy. I will not spend much time on this. We have good sources, and when sources are not that good, then we make some imputation. If we are missing one of the three key income sources according to the Canberra definition, we need to have income from employment, capital, and transfers. These are the three major components. Only if you have all these three components, you can claim you have household income in a harmonized way. So if I happen to miss this, I estimate this. Short answer is nearest the neighbor kind of thing. So regression based, I borrow from similar households that I have for different periods. I run a regression and I make a prediction based on households that are close enough to yours, according to location, size, sector of activity, something like this. It's not obscene. I would say that is standard. That's also what we do when in developing country, if you have experience on that, very often you have tons of food diaries that get lost. They vanish. You don't throw away millions of dollars and then you have to impute something. And this is what we do, basically. It's the same as long as we document how heavily are things imputed. I think it's kind of in line with the international practice. Yes, the idea is that you have a core set of observations for which you have I don't have an answer because the database is now changing by the minute. There are about 40 people around the country that every night they throw what they have found in the archives. If it's pictures, I kill myself. If it's records, I'm happy because I can use it.
You have an idea, like 20% of all the three parts reported. Yeah.
I think it depends on the decades.
Yeah.
We are desperate for the beginning, for the first 50 years. But this is also a time where, public transfers were non-existent, basically. So we just use source by source and document the way I think historians can contribute to this interdisciplinary project. You have to keep many dimensions under control, technical, but also historical. And this DGP, it's a big data generating process is a big concern. But I'm just sharing with you the process. So the idea is that we have to come up with a common definition of income because that is, of course, heterogeneous across different places. This is the trick. I'm very proud of this because I think it works very well. I'm taking you in 1873. These numbers are close to real, at least it was 1 week ago. And this is the size of how many households we happen to enter our database for Italy in that year. And here we have strata. Here it's a simple 5 by 3 strata. So it's 15. We have 4 macro areas, right? Different macro regions of the country and 3 sectors of activity. Right now, we are using 4th, some non-professional condition, but this is just for the sake of illustration. And by chance, by pure accident, this is the distribution of our households according to this strata. As you can see, in certain strata is not bad, in others we are desperately bad, right? And so what do? Well, we take population from the census. We know from the census how many people belong to each stratum, right? And therefore I can calculate for each stratum here, and I'm saying this 109 northwestern industrial households are taken to represent that many individuals in the population. How do I know? Well, because I know how many people were living in this stratum in that year. So this gives me a very powerful tool because I'm fully aware that I'm not happy with this. I'm just putting too much weight on these 2 households. So I just focus and I call my collaborator, say, hey, please find someone here and so forth. So I'm just trying to put in balance my underlying data so that I have decent sized strata. That is the challenge.
And is there any, sorry,
Yes.
is there any way that then you can check all type of regional,
Yes, I think.
which you can serve the representative?
Yes. But remember that we have to, I have the next slide that is for you, which is this one. I'm getting to you in a second. This is the survey, what I have from my sample for 1873, right? I hope it's not that peak here. Anyway, it's the average that I have in the sample, and I compare it with the average that I have in the national accounts. So as you can see here, this dashed line is 1. So if the sample and weighted sample and national accounts, they go along together, they match, then here I'm oscillating and they are in good agreement. But for the more I go back in time, the far off I am from agreeing with national accounts estimates. But do not forget that national accountants are also desperate. So it's not, yes, please.
In that sense, that might also be because there is a lot of informality in the previous period. No?
Yes,
And
yes,
relying on
you're very right.
Industry, on ministries. In the end, your 100 observation might all come from the ministry and formal employment.
You are absolutely right.
Do you do any comparison between, because one thing is the amount of people you have in certain area, but the other exercise to see the comparison between different sources, no? Like one is the income, the other is like the ministry. How they compare, are they giving still information? There's a huge discrepancy because one is fully formal, the other not.
That is super important. And yes, the short answer, I'm going back to the previous one. It's now we are using a 4th category, which is called non-professional condition. That is a little bit of a beast where we have CEOs, informal sector, all kinds of people. But this is also conditional on the information available in the population censuses. That unfortunately is not consistent over time in every country, please.
Yeah, building off of that question, what exactly is reported in these censuses in terms of the occupation? Is it by sector? Is it like you said, CEOs, whatever? What's in the census?
This is these numbers here, the ones that I use as weights. I hired a demographer, someone that does that job. They try to harmonize population censuses and come up with how many people, individuals, live in households headed by someone employed in different sectors. We have the number of individuals. Very often we don't have the number of households. This is the difference with modern surveys. Now you can, as an individual, you don't have chances to be sampled and be part of a survey. As you know, you must be identified as a dwelling. Then you have a non-zero probability of being surveyed. Similarly here, we only have how many people lived inside the household headed by someone occupied in one of the different sectors.
And how did they identify the occupation of that individual?
It's multiple, it's many volumes where you have a very fine description of different categories here. In order to deal with this number of years, I have to be happy for the time being with these 4 broad categories. But in principle, I could go finer and finer. So split agriculture in mining and agriculture and industry in different types of industry. Yes, please.
Because I was thinking there is a Chilean person who did something similar for the using social tables, dynamic social tables for Chile. Is
I have a slide for you. Don't mention dynamic social tables to me. I have a slides.
No, but the point
No, but
being
you're
is
right.
that like a potential limitation to this, or potential way to improve it is that this matrix changes through the years in the sense
Yes.
that services have agriculture today versus 100 years ago have nothing
Yes,
to do. So maybe
yes,
it's
yes.
not the same. And you can imagine that in the past, large part of the people that you don't observe are subsistence farmers, which today are irrelevant, but they were not irrelevant 100 years ago. So this could be a huge part of this economy. So you can create, let's see, like 3 different matrices that you use, which are not the same through time, and this will allow you to kind of capture these people that are relevant in the past, not anymore. Services that have varied, so you capture a bit of, because now you're using the same matrix to capture the full history.
You're very right.
It's
This,
problematic, no?
especially for our ambition of having yearly estimates, we are dealing with the interpolation of weights because the population censuses were carried out at 10 years intervals. And we are using, in that sense, the dynamic social tables. They use interpolation or labor force survey when it's available, right? And we are doing the same here, of course. We have a different matrix for each year. Nothing is different. And we take into account, especially when you have wars, when you have pandemics, all these weights, they change a lot. And so I have a few slides on this later on. This is the idea, basically, and those slides are coming. You have that we use the, instead of, let me do this picture here. This is clearly homemade. It was last night. If you focus on any year, right, in the past, I have different colors. Agriculture, industry is the 4 strata that I have. And inside each region, I have the 4, it's the other way around. Inside each sector, I have the 4 macro areas. So overall, it's 20 strata per year. Now it's what I do, similar to what IMF and World Bank does today. In order to figure out what happens in 1 year later, I run a micro simulation. I take people in each of this stratum here. I know, because of national accountants have figured out what has been the yearly growth rates of agriculture in islands. And so I multiply this people that I have here to take into account how much on average that specific sector in that area has grown, right? And this way I can go both directions, back and forth, because history, we know everything. Unlike the World Bank that doesn't know it, they have projections of what will happen, right? Here we have the advantage of knowing that. And we also have an advantage because we know how large is the share because of the population censuses, they tell us. So I can take into account 2 factors, the population dynamics and changes in the distribution across sectors, across places, and the change in income that each sector place has experienced. I think all this is clearer with yes, please, 5 minutes, yes. So I have 30 seconds per slide, which is, this is the way I can move back and forth in time, just using one projector, right? This is the growth rate. This is the sort of standard. If I use this technology, sometimes today countries are so poor that the only thing that they have is the projector of GDP. Then this is what international institutions do, right? They make a projection on what will happen on average. It's not very interesting. We can do better than this. We can use, as you can see here, growth rates that are different depending on the sector, and therefore I can use projectors that have been calculated and dimensions also of sectors to make predictions. If I do this, I can easily, this is what national accountants gives us. I've taken a recent year. For each sector, I know the growth change. I can calculate this, and then I can work out what has happened the year before just by applying the formula that we have seen. This is the static microsimulation sort of framework. You can make it add some fancy fine-tuning a little bit, but what you end up with, it's a nice this is the cumulative distribution function, and we can start being in the modern world where you have stochastic dominance to examine everything, and you have all the tools that you have for modern welfare analysis in the past. You can focus on certain section of the distribution to figure out how things change, because here we are zooming in one tail. You can be tempted to push your prediction further back in time. So instead of stopping there, so in principle, we can do this. We just need to use the same thing, but in practice is not a good idea because we are preventing, these are not behavioral, they are not responsive to how people change. So it's better to keep it short. So given that we have a sense of how all these sectors have changed over time, we can do this year-to-year projections, just mimicking, borrowing, taking the information that comes from history. This is the way things have materialized and realized, and we take this on board, and this gives us a slightly more sophisticated mechanism to make predictions, where we have the advantage that we take into account not only of the growth rates in specific sectors, but also on how sectors' size has changed over time, which is in a way a nice way of incorporating, even if ex post, movement of people. So as long as you don't overstretch and you resist temptation to make predictions too far away, too distant in time, I think this is not too bad. And what you get in the last 3 minutes, well, I will spare you this. Here I'm just simulating what if I did this kind of simulation using modern data, right? So using real data, if I simulated 1978 based on 1977, given that I also have the real 1978, I can compare how close are my simulations to what I have in the microdata. There is no general rule here. I'm just saying that it's close enough for a first attempt to have this as a reward. Let me go quickly. So basically, this is changing by the day. This is the stochastic dominance kind of all curves. This is a tribute to a nice paper that Chico has written, Distribution in Motions. I'm a big fan of that chapter that has been published, I think, recently, Distribution in Motions. And it's nice because you can figure out many properties. It gives you, for the whole 160 years, not just the Gini, it gives you everything. Here we are using modern data, tabular data, and then we are using the whole is the microsimulated, and the not whole of the full dot things are our benchmark years. And we can have all possible indicators on a yearly basis. This is actually what we have. We can do more than this because we can estimate poverty lines exactly as we do with the bank, with the World Bank or with other institutions. So we can do it using World Bank method, the US method. They get very close. There are circumstances under which the upper bound cost of basic need, it's identical to the Orshansky's method in terms of poverty line. So once you have this beautiful sort of sense of how fast is the increase in the minimum cost of living over time, you still can have a sense of not just the incidence, but depth and all possible indicators, the way they change over time. As you can see, there is a lot of action. I'm not spending here time in interpretation because data are really changing by the minute, and I still have 6 months of data collection. So I would waste your time in figuring out whether what is nice is that you can construct growth incidence curves. You can see these are the miraculous years. Italians, as you might know, they have a tendency to believe in miracles, and then you have this, this is the beginning of the miracle, and you have a sense of how these years have been miraculous, not from the GDP point of view, but from the who benefited from the growth, right? And we have some apparently interesting results. This is the impact of the first oil shock, and this is a pro-poor type of growth. It's worth investigating, and I'm just saying that this it's kind of, we hope it will facilitate interpretation of these shocks and see how they impact on the whole distribution. I'm closing this with a beautiful, 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 beautiful graph. I love it that much. And this, it's unpublished papers, I think. I was hoping to meet with Stefan, but I can see that he's busy. And here is, this is telling the history of the United Kingdom in terms of inequality. How different is the history depending on the indicator that you pick, right? You can attach, and sometimes when I give a lecture, I attach pictures of the prime minister here, right, to figure out who is where. And here you have a story that it's telling you not much action if you use the genie, lot of action if you use the tail, a different story if you use a different indicator. So we can reproduce this this is exactly what we have in Italy using the same sort of idea. Different indicators embed different value judgments. You care differently about different people in the population, and you end up writing a different economic history for the country. And as you can see here, I'm really impressed. And this is my last comment, and I will thank you for your attention. Look at the genie. This is our beloved genie. Genie, you know very well. Right now, I have many students that they think is an acronym, right? But Corrado Gini was the first founding president, Corrado Gini, of the National Statistical Institute, 1926. And this is the index, which is telling you something that doesn't make much sense. And the reason I think, and I'm going back to the importance of writing history, taking advantage of modern literature that has been developed. So there is a beautiful paper in the Review of Income and Wealth, I think, by Cowell and Flasher, very recent, that is showing you what's wrong with Gini. And that explains why Gini here is silent about all the changes in inequality that are visible to whoever comes to the country. And also it's a kind of changes that it's registered by other indicators. So my conclusion is that, well, I was quoting Pirandello here. At this stage, I have little in terms of results because they are changing. This data allows the investigation of a very important issue that we have in our country since we were born as a country, the North-South divide, right? It's still there. So we have a sense of its evolution. We have preliminary estimates of social mobility because we have this longitudinal dimension. So we can compare what was happening in the 1880s with the mobility summary measures that now I don't have time, but as you can see, we are start getting with consistent data. This is the difference with not second best or interpolation. So this is my last slide. I'm just saying that if ever we will make it to merge the data with the population registers, that for some reason in my country is close to impossible, then we will have a chance to really investigate inequality of opportunity and social mobility in a serious way, because we have first best income sources that are connected to the whole parental background, and that will give us a very good opportunity to investigate these issues with a geographical disaggregation that is unprecedented, right? Because it's more than 8,000 different municipalities for which this information is available. Okay, I hope I'm good with the time. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Giovanni, for that exciting presentation. There was a lot of interaction. We have time just for one last short question. Perhaps if there's anyone from
Not too difficult, not the last one.
It's actually related to the last point that you were showing, this north-south divide. Then when you're computing these growth rates by industry, is there any way that you can also create different growth rates to regions, or at least north-south or something like that?
Yes, yes, the problem is here, I'm struggling to come up with a national representative curve. Here I'm overstretching. I'm just showing you the potential because I happen to have a super large sample. So I have some confidence that this is also representative of subnational.
My question is more about the growth rates.
All right.
You can compute them separately.
Oh yes, we can.
it would be more consistent with dynamics within. the
Absolutely,
area.
yes.
That's because this graph was showing some difference.
Yes, we do.
But
Thank you.
really nice.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much again, and thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Wow.